Apple just updated their iPhones and I got myself the iPhone XS Max, not just because my name is Max, but because mainly I wanted the larger screen size compared to my iPhone X. Now I did watch the announcement and they really focused on the camera updates that they made, but honestly I was not expecting that much because the iPhone X already looked great for a smartphone and most companies really try to play up their updates to get you to buy the newest one. After I got my hands on it and after I went out and started taking photos, I was honestly shocked by how good these images look, both with the portrait mode and the Smart HDR functionality. So I decided to put it against one of the most popular cameras and the best deals on the market right now, the Sony A7 III. Now for this comparison, I want to do it first starting off blind style. I want you guys to get a notepad, a piece of paper, open up an app on your phone, and I'm going to show you images side by side. One is marked A, one is marked B. Write down which one you like better, or maybe write down which one you think is the iPhone if you want to do it that way. And you can pause it if you want a little bit more time to take a look. And then at the end, I'm going to give you guys the results, which one is which, and let me know your honest opinions down in the comment section below. So I wanted to match this up as best as I can, so I'm using a 28mm f2 that matches up very closely with the 26mm lens on the back here. And for the telephoto lens, this one I believe is a 56mm. And here I have the Sony 55mm, so very close as far as focal lengths. And then I also matched up the blur with the blur adjustment for the portrait shot. So I'm gonna have links to all of these lenses and the camera in the video description, just in case you guys wanna check that out. Let's take a look at that, and then afterwards I will give you my opinion on the images. Alright guys, so hopefully that was interesting. If you did not write down your results of which one you thought was the iPhone or which one you preferred, please pause the video, go back, write it down. It's much more fun that way. And I'm going to tell you the results in a second here to give you enough time to pause. So the iPhone was the one marked letter B. So please let me know in the comment section below, how many of those did you get right? How often did you guess that which one was the iPhone? Or if you did it the other way, how often did you prefer the iPhone photo? And I do want to let you know that I in no way gave the upper hand to the iPhone. I literally took the phone out, hit the shutter button, and that is all. With the A7 III, oftentimes I actually took 3, 4, 5 photos, found the one with the best exposure. I did have dynamic range optimization turned on, and it was interesting. And in a couple of those shots, I actually turned on the HDR mode and I maximized it to 6 EV. It took much longer with the A7 III compared to the iPhone. And the Smart HDR in here is just so impressive. If you guys have heard of the term computational photography, you're not just trying to improve the sensor or the lens here, you're trying to stack images together, do tone mapping, do the HDR functionality, a lot of what Apple is doing with this new iPhone, and some other companies are really pushing that to the limits as well. And I really would like to see that more so in some of these, high-end cameras, so they take advantage of that to take multiple photos and be able to process them. Starting off with this first image, I was shocked by how well the Smart HDR worked. This was almost at high noon. The shadows were very dark in real life. The A7 III is about kind of what it looked like, maybe brought up the shadows a little bit more than real life. But the iPhone really made the image look good. It really retained all the details there. Of course, the image isn't as sharp, and I think it's a little bit over sharpened, but it got all the highlights in the shadows, and it's a great looking image. Likewise with the second image, I think the Smart HDR is actually bringing up the shadows a little bit too much. I think it needs a little bit more contrast. It looks a little bit flat, but it's shocking by how much detail it retains in those shadows. Here's our first portrait mode photo. I do prefer the A7 III, has more contrast, but the iPhone did a great job to pick her up and separate her from the background. They've been getting much better at that. I don't see any weird artifacting or edging, and the blur at f1.8 setting on the iPhone looks really nice and realistic too. Here's another portrait shot set to f1.8. The separation isn't perfect, but it's pretty impressive for how much different edges there are and the fact that it's not a person. The background in this shot was really dark and there was a lot of highlights here. The Smart HDR did a great job. On the Sony, you really need to edit this yourself, even with the dynamic range optimization mode kicked up. But in reality, it was really dark in the background there. The iPhone just makes it look like a completely different scene, and the bokeh looks great on the iPhone too. This was the biggest shocker. It was dark inside my house. It was super bright outside. I set the A7 III to HDR mode with 6 EV, the most HDR you could do, and I shot like 4 or 5 photos, and I chose the one that looked the best. And with the iPhone, I literally hit the shutter button once. It did a great job pushing up those shadows and retaining most of the highlights outside the window, and it's just so impressive with the color and what it did. It's shocking, honestly. We'll take a look at some raw photos afterwards. In this scenario, the A7 III definitely looks better. An actual lens could separate your subject just based on where you're focusing, where the iPhone has to kind of blur all those edges and ends up blurring a lot of the leaves. The Smart HDR is crazy because that hotspot on the right-hand side was super bright, but we don't have enough contrast. It just looks flat. There's too much HDR. It's doing too good of a job in terms of HDR. You could add a little bit of contrast back in, but I like the Sony shot. And here's our first selfie. I was really impressed with the front-facing camera portrait mode. The background is blurred about as much as with f2 on my Sony, but shooting at f2, you see my face is in focus and my son is out of focus, where the iPhone kind of picked up both of our faces and kind of did a gradual blur. So anyways, the Sony shot looks better, but you can't really shoot at an f2 if you want to keep both subjects in focus. Now this is a low light mode at f2.8. It's about 1000 ISO on the A7 III. The noise is very minimal on the iPhone because of the stacking of the images. The edging on this hair and his ear isn't perfect, which obviously on the A7 III it is perfect. It's real. But I was impressed with the tone mapping. If you look at his face, you have the highlights and the shadows are just really gradual. It looks really pleasant. Where the A7 III's image, that's actually what it looked like in real life. So the iPhone is making the shot and the scene look better than it actually is and kind of brightening up certain areas. So even though it's not as sharp, it's a great looking image. Now we're getting even darker with the wide angle camera, and of course the Sony looks sharper. We have a little bit more separation from the background, and as far as the scene, the Sony is very realistic. It was kind of cooler, and we had kind of darker on the carpet and the rug, where the iPhone just made it more pleasant looking as far as white balance, even though it's not as realistic, and it brought up those shadows, which gives you a nice looking image, but it's not what it looked like in reality. Shooting the same shot but with portrait mode, the iPhone just does not have enough light. The image starts looking horrible. It's very noisy with artifacts and it's not very sharp, where we have a nice pleasing looking image even though it's quite dark here with the full frame sensor. And lastly, this is a nighttime shot with a distant street lamp. We have the city in the background. I'm able to kick up the ISO. There's enough light coming in that I can get this beautiful looking image. On the iPhone, I was really surprised by how close that blur, the bokeh, actually matches. It's not just making like bokeh balls and blurring it out. It's shaping the bokeh to what you would get with this actual lens, which is basically the same style of lens for that focal length equivalent. The iPhone just was not able to gather enough light because it is a f2.8 aperture and it's a much smaller sensor for that portrait camera than the wide angle camera, so it's grainy, but I'm just so impressed with that bokeh. So if you're actually doing nighttime photography, obviously you want to get a real camera. I know that some of you will say I should be shooting RAW with the A7 III. That's how you maximize your image quality, and yes, that is absolutely true. And for just family photos and personal stuff, it's not worth it. Yes, if I'm getting paid to shoot images, I'm absolutely shooting RAW. But just like on the phone, if I'm just going out to shoot, I'm shooting JPEG. But I still wanted to show you guys the results of shooting RAW. So here is the comparison shooting JPEG with the best HDR with the A7 III versus the Smart HDR in the iPhone. Big difference, and I think the iPhone looks better. Here is raw images. I use Lightroom to take a raw image with the iPhone and comparing it to an edited raw image with the A7 III. And yes, the A7 III image looks great. The image is so noisy when I pushed up the shadows on the iPhone. And with how good computational photography is, you'd be much better off just opening the camera app, taking a photo with JPEG. The results are actually better overall. So that is impressive. The computational photography part, of course, you can get some better images shooting RAW, but that took me at least 2-3 minutes maximizing the image from the A7 III, and it is impressive how close the JPEG comes to the RAW image out of this iPhone that's, you know, $1,000 or $1,100. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you guys want to see more videos like this one. We're gonna have reviews, we're gonna have a lot of tech related videos on this channel, and please enable those notifications. Once again, I'm gonna have links to the lenses and the camera that I used in the description, so make sure to go check that out. This has been Max, and I will see you in the next video.